everyone. It's so great to be with you here at Venture Atlanta. Today, I'm joined by Robert F. Smith, founder and chairman of Vista Equity Partners. Vista is one of the leading enterprise software investment firms globally with $81 billion in assets under management. Since 2000, the firm has participated in over 520 private equity transactions, representing over $202 billion. Investing aside, Robert has many philanthropic pursuits and works tirelessly to liberate the human spirit through education and economic opportunity. Most recently, he teamed up with Rich Lesser from Boston Consulting Group and Dan Schulman from PayPal to launch the Southern Communities Initiative, an effort to accelerate the deployment of corporate resources to 6 Southern communities, including Atlanta, that are home to approximately 50% of African Americans. Additionally, off the heels of his now famous gift to Morehouse College's graduating class of 2019, Robert founded the Student Freedom Initiative to relieve the burden of debt for STEM students at historically Black colleges and universities. We are so thrilled to have him here today at Venture Atlanta. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Jewel. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So since many of our attendees are watching this from Atlanta, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your prolific gift to Morehouse College. Tell us what inspired this gift and how has access to education impacted your professional career and journey?
Sure. The challenge I think that America has is to frankly create an opportunity for African Americans to really participate in this economy more fully and completely. And unfortunately, the burden of student debt coupled for African Americans, coupled with in many cases a employment dynamic that is not as favorable, creates frankly a wealth generating inhibitor. And I felt that, as one way to change that is liberate, I'll call it 400 Eagles or Morehouse grads to now go out and use all they've learned, their capabilities without that burden to show what they can do. Further to that, as you mentioned, the Student Freedom Initiative is really designed to eliminate some of the burdensome Parent Plus loans, which our students disproportionately take for STEM students at HBCUs and MSIs, and we've rolled that program out this fall. So, in essence, education has been in the past the great equalizer. Access to education is critically important, and liberation from the student debt, I think, is kind of the next phase in how we ensure that our community have real access to the economic opportunity that America has always at least stated as an important part of its mantra.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, we saw so many Morehouse graduates, a part of that class, apply to some of our startup initiatives. And I think that just demonstrates that these students were able to go out into the workforce with so many more options. And some of them, even taking the risk of becoming an entrepreneur because they didn't have that burden of student loan debt. So that's so important to our entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. And we have many entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs joining us at this event. As a founder and CEO yourself, what has enabled the success of Vista and your success along your journey?
Sure, there's a couple of things that I point to that are critical that we all need to understand. One is, this is part of this conference, access to capital. I mean, meaningful capital at scale. That gives one the ability to really invest in the business and expand in typically the people to help run that business and the products that will support it and sustain it. The second thing is access to knowledge. If you haven't grown up, and I know, Jewel, you come from a family of entrepreneurs and business owners. If you haven't grown up in that environment, understanding how to run businesses is critically important. In order to be successful at it, the ecosystem of shared knowledge and learning is as critical as capital. And in the world I live in technology and in software, 90% of the entrepreneurs that we do business with and founders, the company they're running is the biggest company they've ever run. And so how do they develop and build capabilities and best practices or insights in order to learn how to run that company better? In many cases, they don't have, I call them penalty-free environments to share ideas or garner knowledge from executives who have been at companies much bigger or been to that same growth curve, have been there a few years earlier or a dozen years earlier. And it's that kind of an ecosystem that we have created at Vista. So when I think about what has made us successful is we have been able to create an environment, a culture, if you would, that enables that sharing of best practices, that sharing of knowledge and skills, so that an entrepreneur who's running a $50 million revenue software business can talk to one of our entrepreneurs who's running a $2 billion business that used to be 50 million, and say, here's all the steps, and here's the things you need to think about, and here's the pillars that you need to put in place so you can scale your business, so you can grow at scale as opposed to just grow by accident. And so that deliberate intention of building out systems, infrastructures, and ecosystems has been, frankly, the key to our success and access to capital. And I don't take that lightly. It's just critically important that you get all those things right. And it's difficult as an entrepreneur doing a startup to get all of it right every single time, but you've got to figure out how to create, places where you can actually spend time with peers, where they're not conflicted, and enable each other to grow.
Absolutely. And that ecosystem development that you speak about, I think is one of the more fascinating things that I've seen as far as what Vista has done, where you have those 70 portfolio companies that are able to really thrive because of each other. You have ones that have kind of been in the game for a bit longer and can help out the newer companies. And that ecosystem development is something that we are actually working on here in Atlanta as well. We want to take some of the learnings from what you all have done at Vista Equity Partners and bring it to the ecosystem development that we work on here. And so having companies that have been through the full cycle, they've built the company, raised money, sold the company, and have those leaders come back and mentor and advise the earlier stage companies is something that we really care about here. So I'm happy to hear you say that. So pivoting a little bit, I want to talk about, how do you all evaluate companies? So especially companies that are already doing great, maybe they're already at $50 million in revenue. How do you really look at these companies and evaluate what can make them exceptional? How do you move them from great to exceptional through your evaluation process and then through the work that you do with them as you bring them into your portfolio?
Sure. I look at a couple of things with my team. I think I kind of put them in two big buckets. One I call, product superiority, and the second is execution excellence. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you have to have each of those. You have to have the capacity and capability to achieve each of those. That's what makes an exceptional company. In the world I live in software, it is critical that you have built a team and an infrastructure that has a capacity to deliver superior products. And if you don't, when we're spending time with you, bringing our best practices, our Vista consulting group, our operating MDs, we're really assessing and determining whether or not your culture is able to develop, the superior product in that marketplace. And that culture is driven by people, is driven by, a fabric that is actually able to accept new ideas into that fabric that have been proven other places. And also, a place that also understands its marketplace as to what products that marketplace needs today, what products they need in the future. And then how do we go from where we are with your current product set to where we need to be in terms of, delivering to your customers what it is that they need. So that's one of the first things. And the second is really execution excellence, right? And there's, execution comes in all forms. It's from the way you do your contract administration process, to the way that you touch existing customers, to the way that you actually go after prospects, to the way that you build your product, and the way that you govern your business, and in what ways you actually think about creating a sustainable business model, which absolutely means inclusion. And have you built that? Have you built that mindset? And are you open to the journey to get you there? So, those are the things that we look at. And so a big part of what we do is bring forward now 21 years of experience, over 550 transactions in one space, enterprise software. That's all we do. And so we have learned a tremendous amount. We capture a tremendous amount of that knowledge, and we share, most importantly, that knowledge with our executives to help them execute more effectively. And like I said earlier, most of the founders that we do business with, the company they're running that day is the largest company they've ever run. And, many of the issues they're going to face as a $200 million company, they have no idea because they're a $50 million company. But we've gone through that, numerous times, and can say, here's what's coming. Here's what you need to build to ensure that you have a glide path so you don't stall your growth as you've gotten bigger, but can actually inflect and accelerate your growth because you built the right infrastructure, the right team, the right ecosystem within your company to support that growth effectively. So, it's easy to say, it's complex to actually untangle and unpack and install. But once you have it, it creates a massive opportunity for our entrepreneurs and founders who run these businesses to do extremely well for them and their teams.
Amazing. And I know one of the things that is likely a part of the journey to get entrepreneurs to a point where they are ready to meet you and be evaluated by your team, of course, is raising capital. And so we know that raising capital, a big part of that is relationship building and managing relationships. So talk to us about how people can find the right capital partner and what characteristics are necessary for a healthy relationship between company leader or entrepreneur and capital partner.
Sure. I think, it's critically important to find, an investor or capital partners that know your industry. And again, know what it is that you're up against in terms of hiring, developing people, your go-to-market strategy. What's the way that you should actually think about building your business systemically as opposed to in a haphazard way? And, in this environment, for many industries, capital is somewhat fungible. And, people, we're seeing this in the software space in particular, putting term sheets together and putting bids and doing no diligence. And they're basically, trying to be stock pickers. And, that can work in some cases. But when it doesn't work, it goes badly. And it's just a question of how many stocks you get to pick as to how you back the winners and in essence, abandon losers. And that just happens in the market, the way that people, run those businesses. We take a completely different approach. Ours is, we're going to look for people and companies that we can invest behind and build their capacity. And doing our work, we're looking to invest in the business, not place a bet on the business and hope you can figure it out. We want to help you figure it out and give you tools that we know have worked in that industry being, enterprise software that are, tested and proven. And we have a team of people who work with the senior executives, call it as often as they need it or require it or desire it to actually accelerate, their business progress. That's how we think about it. And that's what I think is an important part of that relationship. Others say, listen, I just want, dumb money to invest. And let me go do my thing. And, that might work if you really know what you're doing. But like I said, most entrepreneurs, the business they're running is the biggest business they've ever run. And, if they really want to grow, it'd be helpful if they had, an open mind to understanding how, extremely large businesses got from being small to extremely large and use some of those tools and insights to get there more efficiently.
Yeah. One of the things that has impressed me the most about your business is how disciplined you all have stayed around just sticking to enterprise technology. So I'm curious, what trends have you seen in enterprise technology space over the years, and what are you particularly excited about right now?
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, the short answer is, enterprise software, business software has been the most productive tool introduced in the business economy over the last 50 years, and likely will be for the next 50. And the dynamic of how that evolves is a function of how technology evolves. evolves. In the early days, enterprise software was only run on premise in large organizations, governments and universities and large institutions. But then we were able to distribute computing power globally, and that computing power now has become available through public and private clouds and connected over networks. Well, now that you have distributed computing power, the capacity of human invention to develop these products for enterprise software is frankly just grown exponentially. And so, to a great extent, what we are looking at is how do we take advantage of how these macroeconomic trends, distribution of computing power, connectivity, IoT, are affecting the enterprise. When we were all shutting our homes in some respects, not all of us, during this pandemic, we all had to rely on some form of enterprise software to stay connected to our customers, our suppliers, our colleagues, our employees, et cetera. And so that created a massive demand. Now we're seeing, the demand for talent starting to accelerate again, which means you're going to have to rely on other enterprise software tools and enablements and catalysts, which I call them, which is, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those sort of things that, you may call them trends, but what they are, catalytic opportunities to accelerate enterprise software adoption. And that's what's going to occur. And that's what's happening. And then ultimately you're going to see, the formation of various ecosystems that are on different blockchain fabrics that create and define an industry. And so understanding that and participating in that part of the investing environment is a critical part in my mind of really touching the future. So, look, there are companies that are on-prem. We probably converted more platforms from on-prem to in the cloud than any institution on the planet. And we have great knowledge and experience in doing that. And now we are investing heavily in what I call, cloud native businesses that have the capacity to accelerate their growth even as they scale if they build the right infrastructure. So that's really what we're focused on and how we're orienting our investment practice.
Yeah, and something else I'm curious to get your thoughts on. I think we are both very passionate about inclusion and making sure that all communities, and particularly, as we think about Black and underrepresented communities, are able to participate fully in this digital revolution that we are witnessing. So what are your thoughts on how Black folks and others can make sure that they are at the table and participating in this shift in the economy as relates to technology? And what are some of the things that you are doing and leading as it relates to that full inclusion of everyone?
Sure. And I kind of, flip that question the other way. It really has to be, what are large corporations doing to ensure that they are, maximizing the opportunity for all citizens in America? African Americans are disproportionately not in technology. And then I look that 82% of HBCUs, where we graduate, a disproportionate number of our engineers actually are in broadband deserts. And I look at this and just get irritated. I look at a friend of mine, Mukesh Ambani, has built out a system, 4G system in India, and in essence is connected. Now he's got over 450 million people on it. And yet we in America can't connect 42 million people or don't want to connect 42 million people to broadband. And that to me is just a travesty. So, one of the things we've done through my, Student Freedom Initiative is we partnered up now with Cisco and AVC Technologies. And we are now digitally enabling every HBCU, bringing them at a minimum to a 4G standard. Some are going to do some 5G pilots. And that will enable, call it the digital backbone for all of our colleges, at least, which then we can think about how we develop extensible solutions for the businesses in those broadband deserts, leveraging the college infrastructure upgrades that we're doing. And, you can think about how that extends to all elements. Once you have that capacity, that access to, computing power, now it should spur the innovative cycle for entrepreneurs to build products and solutions, at least in the tech world, that support the small to medium businesses in those communities, and ultimately that those businesses and those communities can use, providing MSP providers who can now say, all right, I'm going to, cover the 12 or 18 businesses in my community and doing IT infrastructure support. So as part of the upgrade, we're actually training interns at each of these colleges so that they can actually become MSP providers and start their own businesses around these colleges to support the small to medium businesses in their community. So again, it's investing in the infrastructure of the community. And I think the first thing you have to put in is broadband infrastructure. The second thing you have to put in capital access. 70% of African-American communities don't have a branch bank. So we rely on CDFIs and MDIs. And so we've been working to modernize all the CDFIs and MDIs in the US. That modernization initiative, we've already started. One of my companies, Finastra, has built products for that. And now we're just trying to drive capital to ensure that all these businesses get modernized. The difference is, one example is there was one in the Delta, a CDFI, a credit union, and before they got modernized, they did 50 business loans in a year. After modernization, they were able to do 2,500 business loans in 3 months. And these are businesses, loans that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to help a small business, do some capacity additions or whatever it might be. And it makes a huge difference. But if you don't have access to capital, you don't have access to the modernization elements of a digital economy, you're not going to get there. So that's why corporations have to actually be thoughtful about. They talk about labor shortage and growth shortages. I mean, you just uplift the African-American community, and it should, McKinsey did a study, should add another $1.5 trillion of GDP that, everyone shares in. So those are the elements that are the issues, and these are some ways to solve it.
Absolutely. All of that resonates deeply with me. I'm an HBCU grad. I graduated from Howard University. And I remember, a long time ago when I was in school, we led a protest on the administration building around access to technology that worked. And that was, over a decade ago. And so it's unfortunate that we're still having to do the work to connect these schools, but it's so important to make sure that these students have access.
Howard's sitting there in Washington, D.C., and you're telling me that we can't get, 4G, 5G access, well, we will now, but, and it took private initiative to get there, a decade after you left, right? I mean, that's a travesty. That just tells you the priorities aren't in the right place.
Right, exactly. But we're obviously, so thankful for the initiatives that you're leading and hope that this really shifts, a movement to make sure that all of these schools have what they need. And to your point, that the corporations, and mine included, I'm going to be sending some notes out to my colleagues at Google to make sure that we are involved in this as well.
Yeah, I tell you, anything you ask, multiply it times 10, because you're the size and capacity where you can actually do that, and wouldn't even move the balance sheet. So I mean, those are the things that need to be thought about, which is all part of the 2% solution, which is how do we get corporations to be very thoughtful stewards of their capital and access to opportunity in the U.S. And we can solve these problems by issuing equity progress sustainability bonds that actually support those sort of activities.
Absolutely. And I think the partnership between the corporations, the CDFIs, the local community institutions, and the private leaders, I think is kind of what we need to move this all in the right direction. So excited about this work. In the past, you've talked about creating on-ramps to opportunity for all people to participate, as this is how we will truly create systemic, long-standing, long-term change. What does this look like, and how does it fit into the rest of Vista's philosophy on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Sure. Again, it has to be holistic, and it has to be driven in a way that the process changes culture. And that means your leadership has to embrace the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion across all elements of our business. For us, we do it at the board level, the C-suite, middle management, and on-ramping, including our internship program. At the board level, I think we now have, the number's like 89% of our boards have at least one person of color, and I think it's 70% have at least one woman on them. We have so much, majority women boards even. There's going in working with partners. to develop capacity to do so. One of the things we just built, you always heard at the board level, oh, there aren't enough African Americans who qualify to be on these boards. Well, and then you talk and you click down and say, well, they're not on any boards now. I'm like, well, if don't give them a first chance to be on a board, then they never have a chance to be on a board. So we go to the same 25 people and ask them to be on the boards, which is the wrong answer. So we actually built a system and partnered with the National Society of Black Certified Public Accountants, and in essence, have a training system. So now we're adding, I say, every software company, you may not be an expert in software, but you do need somebody on the audit committee and someone on the nominating committee. So we're training directors to put on our boards to at least be on those committees. So then when it comes up, when we take those companies public, they're on a public board, and or others, are looking for folks who have that sort of experience. I probably get 3 of those calls a week. We now can say, here's, a pool of 50, 60 folks who we've trained who are, in our ecosystem that can serve on those boards. And so building a pipeline is a critical part of it. But if you don't start today, it's not going to happen. The second thing is, I call it really changing the culture. And, we have some really talented people in our organization. One of them, Khalida Ali, who is now built out, she's a Spelman grad, but who's built out our conscious inclusion program, which is a journey for all of our executives to go through, not just at Vista, but every one of our portfolio companies, to first kind of understand what the issues are, understand bias, how it manifests in the market, in the business workplace. And then, what do you do to ensure that you're an advocate to eliminate those unconscious biases and create a conscious inclusion mindset and culture in your businesses? So, but you've got to put deliberate action and intention behind it, and processes. And oh, by the way, tie people's compensation to it. We tie to the compensation of my senior people, to the CEOs of our portfolio companies, and rank and file, and every board deck. We're looking at KPIs and metrics, and if you're not hitting them, you're not getting paid. Plain and simple. So those are the things that are important to align on, rather than the words and the platitudes. You got to actually put processes in place, measure them, and people get paid against it, or not paid if they don't achieve the results you desired.
Absolutely. The compensation and making that have an impact if these things are not achieved, I think is so important to actually make these things happen. And I think that's something that the entrepreneurs in the audience can take away, that these are decisions and it has to be intentional, and you have to put metrics around all of these items as well. I think it's critical to do that. So we've covered a lot today, a wide spectrum of topics, but I wanted to close with something you said in a letter that you wrote, published in the New York Times following the death of George Floyd, where you mentioned the endless pursuit of a more perfect union. For those that may grow tired of witnessing injustices and inequality in our society, what advice do you have to keep us motivated to keep working towards a more inclusive world?
Sure, I think it's pretty simple, and that's do your part. Many of you actually have more influence than you think. You can influence, individuals in individual conversations, or you can influence, corporations. Like you, Jewel, you're in one of the largest corporations on the planet. And if you think about it, you have the capacity to make changes, outside changes to any inequities that you see in access to technology, access, in broadly speaking, for underrepresented minorities and African Americans in particular in this country. And so, it all comes down to, organizing and not being shy and saying, here's what we need. Here's what our country needs. Here's what we need to do to enable, these 40 million citizens to be more effective at contributing, again, not that they don't, but to the technology opportunity that we have. And here's what we can do in our company to help. And so everybody just has to do their part and be relentless in the pursuit of that, more perfect union, which means a broader, inclusivity, not a tolerance, an inclusivity of people in this country to participate in the great economic opportunity that is America. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. So I encourage everyone, from the seat that you're seated in today, take a look around and see what can you do to push us all forward. And really don't take it for granted, the influence and the role that you have to play in this more inclusive society. So with that, again, thank you so much Robert, for joining us today. This has been such an amazing conversation. I'm sure the audience will enjoy it, and it's been a pleasure to lead it with you.
Thank you, Jewel, and we will see you soon. All the best to you.
Thank you.